Hello, this is Gair and Karunatillake Lesson 3, Reading 2. That's on page 29 in the printed book. I will read through the Pali first, and then we'll analyze it in detail. Kim manyata salha attilubhoti evam bhante abhijhati ko aham silha etamattam vadami ruddhoko ayam salha abhijhalu panam tihanati adinnampi adiyati paradarampi gacchati musapi bhanati yang sahoti tikaratam ahitaya dukkhayati evam bhante tankim manyata salha atti dosoti evam bhante vyapadoti ko aham etamattam vadami ruttoko ayam salha vyapanna chitto panam pihanati adinnampi adiyati paradaram gacchati musapi bhanati yang sahoti dikarattam ahitaya dukkhayati evam bhante tam kim manyata salha ati mohoti evam bhante avijjati ko aham salha etamattam vadami mulho ko ayam salha avijjagato panam pihanati adinnampi adiyati paradarampi gacchati musapi bhanati yang sahoti digaratam ahitaya dukkhayati evam bhante tankim manyata salha ime dhamma kusalava akusalavati akusala bhante savajjava anavajjavati savajja bhante vinyugarahitava vinyupasatthavati vinyugarahita bhante. So we'll now analyze the text. First word, tam. Tam, from root word tad, meaning that. Tam, it usually means that, but here it just means so. Tam kinmanyata, as in English we would say, so what do you think? And kim is the usual word meaning what. Now, the root man, cognate with our word mind, means to think, and it's a fourth class verb in Sanskrit. That means it adds a ya. So man, he thinks, manyati, not manati, that doesn't exist, manyati. And in Pali, an ny tends to become a double nya. So almost always becomes a double nya. So manyati, he thinks. Manyami, I think. Manyata, that's the plural form. Manyasi, singular. No, manyasi, you think, singular. Manyata, plural. Here the conversation is between just two individuals, but the plural form is used as a mark of respect. It's not done so much in Sanskrit and Pali, it's done occasionally. Of course, it's very normal in modern European languages to varying degrees, most notably French and German, but also to a slightly lesser extent, Italian and Spanish. whereas the French, got quite a road to travel before you start saying tu instead of vous, and pretty much likewise in German. I think the Spaniards are far more willing to use the familiar form tu, and the Italians kind of somewhere in between, though I can be corrected on that. In Sanskrit and Pali, much more ready, in fact, far more normal to use the singular form, but for great respect, they move to the plural, which is why we have manyata, because he's speaking to the Maharaja, so he uses the plural form, a bit like the royal we in reverse. It's the royal you. So that explains why we have this plural form in manyata rather than the expected singular form manyasi. So kin manyata. Sorry, he's not speaking to the Maharaja, he's speaking to Salha, but he's still using the very, very polite plural form. So what do you think, Salha? Atilobho. Ti. Ti is just this unquote, end of quote, which you'd put in writing. When he was saying it, he'd just say, Kim manyata Salha atilobho. You wouldn't say the T. The T is put here because it's being quoted by someone else. Atilobho. Ati in Sanskrit, asti. No, let's put it in Sanskrit here. Asti in Sanskrit. Asti. From the root as. Asti. It's from, in Latin, esse, and in Latin, asti, est, modern French, e. Our root, our word is from the same word. So asti becomes, of course, in Pali, ati. We also know the word bhavati and hoti, meaning is, but ati is more common when you're stating or asking whether something exists. It's a bit like the French, il y a, there exists, or c'è in Italian. It's not saying A is B, but you're saying it exists, there is such a thing. So ati lobho, is there such a thing as greed? Evam bhante. Now we know that evam means thus, or in that way. It also means yes. Does it atilobho evam, thus it is, namely yes. Rather like the Latin etiam, meaning thus. It's also used to mean yes. Abhija koham salaha etamattam vadami. Abhija. Abhija is one of those very interesting words. You have the root dya. Of course, in Pali that would be pronounced dya. Dhyana in Sanskrit, jhana in Pali, just means to fix or concentrate the mind. So jhana just means fixing the mind. Abhi, up to or onto. Abhija, double the J now because it's abhidhya, abhija. Abhija, for the mind going up onto something, and therefore coveting it, really wanting it, getting obsession with it. Abhija, your mind's got on top of it. So abhija, then as a feminine noun, abhija, therefore just means covetousness. So etam attam vadami. Vadami, I say. Etam attam means this meaning. etam attam vadami. Literally, I say this meaning. Right. How you analyze the sentence is this. Lobho, ati lobho. Does lobho exist? Does greed exist? Evam. So, abhijati etam attam vadam. So, etam attam, this meaning, is the meaning of lobho. So, I say, vadami, etam attam, this meaning, in other words, the meaning of lobho, or another word for lobho, is abhija. So, all it's saying is that lobho, its meaning, I say, is abhija. Lobho abhijati etam attam vadami. Now, note in the previous sentence, ati lobhoti, the T in the transliteration appears outside the quotation marks. The speaker would have said, Salha ati lobho, and then the writer, written in the written form, T is added because the writer is quoting the spoken word. That's the equivalent of the quotation mark. Notice that here, abhijati ko aham salha etam attam vadami, the T is actually spoken by the speaker because he's saying, vadami, I am saying, etam attam, this meaning, the meaning of lopa, is abhijati. In other words, he's kind of quoting himself. I say that it means, quote, abhija, unquote. Vadami etam attam abhijati. Note that in English we'd say quote unquote. In Sanskrit and Pali, you only put the unquote. That's the T. You never start a quote. Mostly it's clear where the quote starts. There can be ambiguities, but obviously here there's no ambiguity, largely because abhija begins the sentence, abhijati, abhija, unquote, etam attam vadami. I say that this means. Ludho ko ayam salha abhijalu. So lobho, lobha, cognate with our English word love. Cognate doesn't mean love, it just means greed. It's wanting to get something, and that's the basic meaning of this word. So lobha, root lub, sorry, root lub. In the root lub, to make the past participle, oops, sorry, I put the wrong thing there. Boom, boom, boom. Sorry, let's get back to where we should be. Make the past participle lubta. You can't have, I mean, that was how it should go. But in fact, what happens, the lubta becomes lubdha. So the T becomes a D, and the aspiration, the H of the B, gets transferred to the second D, lubdha. We see exactly the same phenomenon happening with buddha becomes buddha. Lubda, lubdha, buddha, buddha. This is a normal phonetic rule in Sanskrit. And in Pali, as buddha doesn't change, doesn't need to change, whereas lubdha in Sanskrit becomes luddha. In Pali, that BD becomes a double D. So that means a greedy person. Apija, we've had the noun apija. You make an adjective out of it by adding a lu, apijalu. So apija is coveting, covetousness. Apijalu is the corresponding adjective meaning covetous. So ludho ko ayam salha, this greedy person, salha. Abijalu, covetous. Panam pihanati. Now, panam, we know that's from prana, Sanskrit prana, meaning, the original meaning prana is breath, and by extension, life. And in Pali, the anapanasati, the root ana, meaning breathing, but panam here doesn't mean breath, it means life. So panam pihanati, he literally strikes or kills life, kills living beings. Adinnampi adiyati, this is a phrase we're well known. The da to give, ada to take. Adiyati, slightly irregular verb. Adiyati, he takes. The adinnam, the ungiven. So adinnampi adiyati, he takes the ungiven, what is not given. Paradaram pi gacchati, gacchati, he goes. Paradaram, para, another or belonging to another. Paradaram pi gacchati, he goes to another man's wife. Gacchati, we know it's the irregular, the root gam gacchati. Musapi banati, ban, root ban is another word for to speak. The more common word for us to speak is bhas or bhash in Sanskrit. So musapi banati, he speaks falsehood. Now, why, you may ask, Musa looks like either a nominative plural or a feminine singular nominative. It could look like that. In fact, it's an indeclinable. And it's more like an adverb, so it doesn't decline. It's more like he speaks falsely. So Musa is not the direct object of Bhasati. It is an adverb modifying Bhasati. So he speaks falsely. Yang sahoti digaratam ahitaya dukkayati. Now this yang sa, written as one word in our printed text here. Sorry, I got the wrong thing again. Oops. Yam sa. Yam just means which, and it's used exactly the same as the English. He does this, that, and the other, which will be to his great disadvantage. The which meaning exactly as it would in English, just referring to everything that he's done before. You know, he kills, he steals, he commits adultery, he lies, which will be to his great advantage, which referring to everything. Exactly the same in Pali. Yam. Now, sa is actually an abbreviation of assa, genitive or dative, for him, to him. So yam assa ahitaya, which to his disadvantage. Just as in English we can talk about something being to your advantage, you can do exactly the same, just this to his advantage, leaving out the is. So which, here of course the is there, yang sahoti, which for him is ahitaya, to disadvantage. It can mean which is to disadvantage for him or which is to his disadvantage, depending whether you interpret the assa, shortened to sa, as being a genitive or a dative. So let me just explain this now. We could say yam hoti, which is assa ahitaya, which huti is, ahitaya to disadvantage, assa ahitaya to his disadvantage. It could also be construed as yam huti assa as a dative, yam huti assa, which will be for him ahitaya to disadvantage. It makes no difference to the meaning, but there's a slight grammatical difference in how you construe this. Sorry, I've written asya as if it was Sanskrit, assa, Pali. Yam hoti assa ahitaya. It doesn't make much difference which way you could construe it. It comes out with the same meaning. So yam sahoti ahitaya dukhayati. You can leave out the and here, which will be to his harm, suffering, to harm, to suffering. You can leave out the cha, and it often is. Now, digaratam, this is an accusative, singular accusative, digaratam, but used adverbially, meaning for a long time. It's not an adjective qualifying anything. It's not a noun. It's an adverb of time, an adverb of time expression for a long time. Digaratam, literally long night. It's just the way it happened. We say long time, they say long night. But it doesn't actually mean night. It just means for a long time. Right, let us go on to the next sentence. Evam bhante, yes, Venerable Sir. Tam kim manyata sala ati dusuti. So what do you think, Salha? Is there such a thing as ill will, as hatred? This dosa, which is the Sanskrit root, Vedic root, dvish, meaning to be hostile, not necessarily hate, but it includes hate. The third person singular present, he hates, is oops, sorry, no, wait.